Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be doing a Cambelt and water pump change on this Audi A3. It's a 1.6 TDI CR engine. So let's get into it. And if you haven't hit that subscribe button, hit it now and hit that thumbs up because you're going to love this video. Okay, so first things first, we're going to open the bonnet. And then we've got our 1.6, I think it's a CRKB engine. It's a 1.6 diesel. So to begin with, just going to pop off our front cover, and that gives us access to this area here. The Cambelt's located behind this plastic panel here, and it goes all the way down to the bottom, so we're going to have to go up in the air, take some under shields off, and clear the pathway of the fuel filter, all the coolant lines, so we can get access to the belt. So what we're going to start off with is we're going to take the pipes off of the fuel filter and the coolant expansion bottle, so we can move them out of the way. Okay, now we've moved our lines out of the way, we're going to take the fuel filter out completely, which is a couple of 10mm bolts. Okay, so you've got two 10mm bolts at the top and then one right at the bottom there. Just use an extension on a 10mm and you can take that completely out of the way. Now we've got a little 30 Torx holding these metal pipes to the casing, so we're just going to take that out. Okay, so we've just taken the clips off of these metal pipes for the DPF pressure sensors, so we can just move those out of the way, which will make getting this top cover off a lot easier. Okay, so when you get to this point and you've removed these DPF pressure pipes out of the way and you've got the cover, take out the exhaust gas temperature sensor there, which should allow us to hopefully get the cover off. Okay, now we've done a little bit up the top, we're just going to take the ramp up and we are going to take off this inner wheel arch liner, which requires a 20 Torx and just lots of bolts, and then it'll pop straight out. Okay, so that's the inner wheel arch lining out. There's lots of little 20 Torxes and some push bolts. It is easier to take the wheel off. The customer doesn't have his lock and wheel nut key with him today, so we're just going to leave the wheel on. So now with that off, we have access in there to the auxiliary belt and the lower pulley. So now we have access to that. We can lower the car back down, jack it up under the engine to support it, and then take the engine mount off. Okay, now we're back down on the floor. We need to remove our coolant bottle and the engine mount. So you undo the connector, pull the two little tabs, and then the coolant bottle should just twist around to the side like so. We do have a little 10mm bolt down here that we can take off if it's getting in the way. That 10mm bolt holds the pipe like that, so if you unclip the pipe, just move the coolant bottle out the way. Now we can move our fuel hoses out the way. Just tuck them up so they don't ping back at you. And now we've got our engine mount here. So with the engine mount, got these two bolts here, two bolts down there, and a 13mm up the top there. Once we undo all those, there's probably some that go into the side on this lower bracket, if that's got to come off as well. So we're just going to take that off, see where we get to. So that mount comes off as one, just like that. Now the engine is free for us to lower it and raise it as we need. What I do think we need to do is take this mount off here. Well, so after you move the engine mount, you've got the engine support here, which is held in by a couple of 16mm bolts. So we're just going to take them off. And then we've just got one more, which is right at the bottom here. So that's the 3 bolts out of that mount. Now we'll have to try and see if it will come out of here. On its own or not. Okay, so we just pop the top mount, the top cover off, just like that. It's a little bit tight down the back end here because you have to get it located. But with that off, we now have access to the belt, the water pump, and all the tensioners. But this mount does not want to come out the way. Ah, there we go. So this mount comes out that way, as you just saw. It's a little bit tricky because these bits are so long. So now we have full access to the top half of the cam belt. We've got the tensioner, the water pumps down here, which actually is leaking. Just show you. So if we can see in there, the water pump's leaking. So it's definitely due to be done. This belt doesn't look in very good condition either, nor do the idler pulleys. It's very dirty. So well overdue, I would imagine. So now we've got the top half off, we can get access to the auxiliary belt tensioner, which is just down here. Just get yourself a 16mm spanner, put it on, twist it anti-clockwise, and then that will slacken off the belt nicely. You can take that out of the way. If you're reusing it, make sure you either mark the rotation or put it somewhere where you won't forget. Okay, so now we're ready up the top. We're going to come down here and we're going to undo the 4 M10 bolts along here. Now we can hopefully just wiggle this pulley off. Just like that. And now we can get our lower cover off and then time up the engine so then we can replace the belt. So I'm just going to undo the bolts for the lower cover and get that off now. Okay, so the lower cover has 4 30 Torx bolts, 1, 2, 3, 4. They do stay in the case, you just undo them, and then there's a little clip at the bottom. If you undo these 4 first and then tilt it towards you and pop it up, you won't break that little clip, which is good. And as you can see here, this one has just got loads of gunk and rubbish in it. So now down here you can see the cam belt cover is all off. Obviously it's disgusting, we're going to have to clean it up loads. But now we're going to get our timing tools and we're going to turn the engine over until we're at the correct time and lock it in position. Okay, so we're ready to turn the engine over. So we've got our 19mm multi-spline socket and we're going to turn the engine over clockwise. As you can see, the water pump is already leaking as we're going. Okay, so we spun the engine over to get it into time, and we have our timing mark there that goes through into the head. Same for the fuel pump. There's a little lug there that goes into the head, and then down on the crank pulley you have this tool here that actually only bolts on one way, and then the pin goes through and locks itself into the block there. That's a laser part. So now the engine's all timed up, we can release the tensioner, take the belt off, and then change the water pump. So we'll do that now. So there's a 15mm nut on the tensioner, which if you slack that off, you can just twist it round by hand to give you a load of slack, which will allow you to get the belt off. That's it, one Cambelt off. Now we're going to tackle this water pump here, which is again M10 bolts. I think there's only 2 or 3 that hold it on. So we're just going to get a tray underneath to catch the coolant. Now the water pump's cracked off, we'll just let that drain out a little bit so it doesn't gush everywhere all over me shop floor. But just to bear in mind, there is a sensor on the top of this water pump here, and it goes up to this brown connector. So all we're going to do is we're going to take that connector off, and we're going to take it all out together. So we pop that little brown connector off, and this plug here should twist to the side. It's a little bit tricky, but you twist it because it sits in this little groove here, twisted in, which locks it in position so it can't come forward and hit the belt at all. And then you just pop it out of this little holder, and that'll come off with the water pump. And then when we check the new one, we'll see if it comes with a sensor or if we've got to change it over. Now we can just start to undo the bolts more on the water pump. As you can hear all the coolant coming out. Don't pull it straight out, otherwise you'll get a mess everywhere. Once it's nearly finished draining, then we can pull the water pump out just like that. And as you can see, this one's been leaking for quite a while. It's caused a bit of a Can you hear that? That's no good. So now the water pump's out. These ones are sealed with a rubber O-ring that goes into the side of the block, so they're actually relatively clean and easy to clean and put back in. But a little tip is if you lower the engine down now, more coolant will run out of the hole. So when you jack it back up to put the water pump in, no coolant's going to be coming out. And just whilst we got all that off, we're just going to try and clean up as much as we can. Now that's finished draining, we just take a clean rag, just go around the hole, make sure there's no debris in there. Just have a good look, inspect inside the hole. We obviously want to put the new one in and not have any leaks whatsoever. So that's looking good. The hole's nice and clean. So we can go ahead and get our new water pump and install it. Okay, here's our nice new water pump. Lovely, and it comes with a sensor as well, which is handy. So we just pop that back in now. Sits on a rubber O-ring just here, presses against the side of the block. It does come with new bolts as well. Right, now the water pump's on and tight, we can go ahead and feed our new plug back into its home. So we just pop it up like that. then you push it into its little gap. Make sure it locates in its little grooves so it doesn't move around. And we can go ahead and just pop our connector back on. And that's the new water pump installed. So now we're going to move on to the Cambelt hardware. So we've got new idlers, new tensioner, new belt. So we can just swap that over. So undo the 13mm for this top idler. Just comes out of the way. Same for the lower idler, 13mm. Okay, so in the new kit we get the new idler, we get two new bolts that go in here. We can swap those over and we're going to pop the two idlers back on and the tensioner, and we're going to do that now. Okay, so we've got our new studs and our new tensioner and lower idler in. So now we've got our upper idler and a new bolt as well. I'm going to position them all in there. They're all in loosely, and we'll tighten them up once the belt is on and tension down. Okay, so now we need to crack off the fuel pump bolt and the cam bolt. So there is a couple of special tools that you need for this. So this one here is a special tool with the three little prongs that will just sit in the fuel pump, just like that. And then we can get our breaker bar in there and that will hold it nicely. We need a 24mm socket and a short extension. And that just holds the pulley whilst you crack that off. That's absolutely fine. And for this one, we just need a 18mm socket on there. And to hold this down, I've just got a tool that I've made, which just goes inside the pulley like this, just to hold it in position whilst we crack it off. So now we've got this one and this one loose. Take our tools back off here. There is a 30 Torx down here. So we're just going to crack that off as well, just to allow the pulley to move ever so slightly. So now with these loosened, we can now get our cam belt installed, which is here. So starting from the crank, go around the water pump, around the fuel pump, underneath your idler, over the top of the cam, round your tensioner, round your lower idle pulley. Now the belt is installed on all the pulleys, how it should be. Right, so before you install the belt, you want to make sure that the cam pulley is turned all the way to the right that it can go. So when we tension it up, the cam pulley can move inside this little circle here and you'll see it pull back. If it's all the way to one side, when you go to tension it, it won't be able to pull back and position itself properly. So now the belt is on fully, we can then move the tensioner into position, which we need a 6mm Allen key. So there's an arrow on here which tells you which way to move the tensioner. In this instance, it's clockwise. So we're going to move this clockwise. until the little needle goes in between the V on the tensioner. Just there. And then we will get our 13mm spanner, and we're just going to nip that up. So now the tensioner is nipped up, it's in the correct position, the belt is on and tight, and then we can now tighten down our idlers. So now the idlers are tightened down, the tension is tightened down, so now we've got to tighten up our main bolts here and here. Okay, so now it's time to tighten down our cam sprocket and our fuel pump sprocket. So if we put our tool back in here, we put our torque wrench on here. This one is 100 Newton meters. Just like that. And our fuel pump sprocket is 95 Newton meters. Don't worry about the beeping, it was just set to a lower Newton meters spec, so I just looked at what was on the gauge. So now our bolts are tightened, 95 Newton meters, 100 Newton meters. We can do up the little 30 torques. Just like that. And then we can take out our timing tools, and we're going to turn the engine over multiple times and then make sure it lines back up in the correct position. So now we're going to turn the engine over. So we're coming up to 2 revolutions of the engine. And take our timing tools as we approach. That one goes in. That one goes in. That one goes in. And we're just going to check the lower one to make sure that's good. Which it is. So that's our timing belt timed up. So now we can go ahead and start rebuilding it to get it back into a running position. Okay, so that was a little time lapse of me putting it back together. So that's all back together now, so let's go and give it a first start, shall we? So, this is a bit no mechanic ever likes. Okay, needs an oil service. Okay, so yeah, she starts, she runs. She sounds sweet. Okay, well I'm going to finish the video there, as I've just got to put some coolant in, run it up, put the wheel arch liner back on, and then go for a road test. But she starts, she runs, and that's how to change your Cambelt and water pump on a 1.6 CR Audi VAG. You know, they're all the same. Obviously I did make one of the tools because I didn't have it here, but I will get one of them ordered up so I've got the proper tool next time, even though my one does perfectly fine. So hope you enjoyed this content, and if you found it useful, hit that thumbs up, hit that subscribe button, and plenty more to come.